one of you, and David told me I couldn't call people out up here. I didn't think you'd mind, but he said, no, 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 don't do that. One of you told us that you would like to hear a talk about Thomas Troward. And so you were heard. I knew you wouldn't mind. You were heard, and here you go. And it has developed so incredibly. And I think we're going to be doing another one, at least one more, on Troward. Because there's just so much to talk about. And of course, when you talk about Troward, you have to go into Holmes, because that's the whole point, right, for taking his work. So our series, to be determined with how long it will be, is really called Who Was Ernest Holmes? And today's topic is Holmes Discovers Troward. So for those of you who don't know who we're talking about, Thomas Troward was an English judge who lived in India in the 1800s. Having studied law, he was well-versed and extremely proficient in following logic. Ernest Holmes read both two of the writings that he did, which he did more, but the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science and the Door Lectures. And then he stated this about Troward. The thing I like about Troward is that he gives a scientific or logical explanation of whatever he claims. Take the idea of unity, for example. He quotes from the ancient teachers of India, the Vedantists, saying that it is impossible to have two infinities. For if there are two, speaking of the devil, for if there are two, neither of them could be infinite. Therefore, there is only one. Ernest Holmes believed Troward's ideas confirmed his own.
Well, I think it's interesting because the first thing I wrote before Deborah and I talked about this together was that the reason I love Thomas Troward is because we can look at spirituality from a scientific perspective, and now realize that Holmes had said exactly the same thing. I actually pulled out my book, Creative Thought, by Thomas Troward, and I was looking for some interesting quotes and things to talk about. I was into the 4th chapter. I just kept reading and reading and reading and realized, oh, I'm supposed to be looking for things to talk about. I find that whenever I pick up Thomas Troward or Ernest Holmes for that matter too, I start reading, and 3 chapters later, I say, okay, now I got to get down to business here. It's really fascinating how he uses this scientific perspective, and it kind of cuts through a lot of the sentimentality of religion and spirituality, and I like that. It's kind of impersonal, but it cuts through anthropomorphic views of what God is and what spirit is, and giving it a human persona. And so it looks at the more nuts and bolts of how it works. And once we realize how it works, we can recognize how to use it. And then once we recognize how to use it, we can then use it. I think it makes this teaching less religious, and I like that. It makes it more scientific, and I really like that. It also makes it philosophical, psychological, and metaphysical. All really good things, because those things seem to make sense to me. Ernest Holmes says, like he was saying in our last talk, that on how to use it, this helps us negotiate the more intangible aspects of our belief system. Those things that are kind of hidden under the surface, but we know they're there, and we know that they are universal truths, and they're very important to us. It helps us to understand how all that stuff seems to work together and actually make sense. There's no magic in logical law. There is no difference in validity from natural law, scientific law, and mental law. All of these can be applied to principle and basic cause and effect. So they're understandable, they're provable, and they're reproducible. Just like science, we can use spiritual law exactly the same way. And I don't believe that most religious doctrines can say that. When we can trace a creative process directly through a series of logical steps, from mental conception to physical manifestation, with no mysterious gaps in between, the magic seems to fade away. And what is left is simply energy working on energy. And when we can follow a logical step-by-step sequence of events from beginning to end, we are dealing with simple cause and effect, not mysterious hocus pocus, or woo-woo, if you want to call it that. So here's an example of how Troward does it. He starts with the nature of infinite being, which is cosmic energy, and he calls it undifferentiated substance. Undifferentiated substance is basically just the realm of infinite possibility not brought into manifest form yet. So there's a whole existence of unformed substance. He calls it undifferentiated because it's not separate parts yet. It's all just one thing. He moves on to form of matter, and he asks this question: why does matter exist? Well, if we're already one with all that is, why do we have to be in physical form? Good question. The answer is that if form were not expressed in solid substance, things would be perpetually flowing into each other so that no identity could be maintained for a single moment. Things would be all one with no differentiation, no separation. So we would not be able to see a thing of itself, so there's no way for it to express itself other than just one big blob of undifferentiated substance. So the allness that it is would go unexpressed and unobserved. We would never get to experience that. And that would be a shame, wouldn't it? That's why it said that man cannot comprehend the infinite nature of God. But if we can understand the principle or nature of undifferentiated substance, we have a starting point. If we can comprehend the principle of a differentiation and individualization, making meaning of individual parts of the whole, we can understand our place and the greater scheme of all that is, and our greater scheme of life. That understanding of individualization allows us to see our oneness with all of life and the importance of our unique individual offering to all the rest of life, leading to the recognition that what is ours to do, and also the meaning of life for us individually. So differentiation is a blessing, because otherwise there really wouldn't be any need for us to be here. Generally speaking, I came to this conclusion that life can be seen as greater and lesser states of differentiation within a substance of infinite possibility, which allows us to be whatever we choose to be, whatever comes to mind, whatever we think about, we can be that. Troward says, matter is the necessary channel for the self-differentiation of spirit. I'll say that again. Matter is the necessary channel for the self-differentiation of spirit. Thus, matter is the necessary polar opposite of spirit. And when we recognize it in its right order, we find that there is no antagonism between the two, but that together they constitute one harmonious whole. That's where they started out from, and when they separated, they were still that, and so we experience one whole in many parts. What he's saying is what we express as matter is a result of what we are as spirit. And because of this intermingling of energy and matter, we have solved the riddle of what Troward calls our legitimate control of mind over matter. Our legitimate control of mind over matter. It's not something we believe that we can do. It's legitimized. It is true that we can actually do that. And so through his logical processes, he proves these things, and there's no doubt whatsoever in our mind that yes, it really works. And then when we actually go about and do it and use it, we can see it happening. That's the whole point of science of mind, our mental control of conditions. We don't ask God to give us things and fix things for us because we take personal responsibility, because we know that we have access to the cosmic power, because we are one with the cosmic power, and we don't have to ask someone else to do it for us. We can do it ourselves if we choose to. We are inextricably immersed in the one life, and we are an intricate part of the cosmic process. It's just that simple.
And it works whether we choose or whether we don't. In the Science of Mind archives, they share 4 ideas that are direct correlations between the works of Troward and Ernest Holmes, and I want to share them with us. We talked about going back and forth and just focusing on these, and I guess that could be another talk. But number 1, there is an impersonal law of the universe that is creative. 2, we create our own dungeons or destiny by using the same creative power that created the universe. 3, omnipresence. Wherever spirit is at all, the whole of spirit must be. There is not a spot where God is not. Now, I've always said that saying as there is no spot where God is not, which kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit easier, but I'm going to change it to this one, which I assume is the original. There is not a spot where God is not. Kind of makes me slow down a little bit instead of just enjoying the flow. And the 4th one is we can use this God power within us consciously to change our life for better. How? How do we use this impersonal law to create a destiny in this God spot called me to change my life for better? Did you see what I did there? I took all 4 of those ideas from the archives and put them into one question. How do we use the impersonal law to create a destiny in this God spot called me to change my life for better? Well, in becoming an observer of my own thoughts, I've noticed how important it is to practice awareness. And I would venture to guess that all of the spiritual practices that we engage in are all an opportunity to practice awareness of our own thoughts. I believe that everyone could benefit from this inner spiritual practice of becoming keenly aware of our own thinking, to the point that we are able to notice where our mind goes, determine if that is indeed where we want our mind to reside, and then practice managing it. Buddha wrote, "Practice the pause. When in doubt, pause. When angry, pause. When tired, pause. When stressed, pause. And when you pause, reflect." I'm going to tell you a story. It's a true story, and I know it's a true story because I have the bragging rights, although once you hear it, I doubt that you would want them. I fell in the shower last Sunday getting ready for church. Now, our shower is long, and it has a bench on both sides, and I was at one end of it. And the whole event took place in the fraction of human time necessary for gravity to pull me to the shower floor. However, for me, the whole event occurred in the now moment that I call eternity. All my practice in controlling my thoughts was about to pay off. I was soaping up my second foot while standing, of course, and both feet went flying forward and up. I had my back to the bench seat. I knew I had lost my balance and I was going down, but suddenly I felt suspended in time. I felt suspended in the air. I could hear my own thoughts. The first one was, I'm going to hurt my back so badly when it lands on that bench. However, my mental practice kicked in immediately, and my first thought was quickly dispelled into, no, I am not. I am going to fall in a manner that keeps me safe and protected. I let go. The suspension ended. I fell, and exactly that happened. I fell safe and protected. As Ernest Holmes says, we know, and we know that we know. I knew in that moment of suspension that I was in the hands of God, that my thought was going to direct what happened. And if I wanted to claim my back falling on that bench and being injured, go for it, baby. But I did not. Practice makes perfect. I had no side effects at all whatsoever. And my feet literally went out the shower, and David came in and said, what are you doing? What happened?
Taking a bath in the shower.
Yeah. So for me, this is cause and effect. Relatable. As David said, I changed undifferentiated substance into individualization. Troward had such an impact on our wonderful founder.
Thomas Troward says, it's an enduring truth which can never be altered that every infraction of the law of nature must carry its punitive consequences with it. We can never get beyond the range of cause and effect. He says we can never get beyond the infraction. When we create an infraction in the law, when we use the law in a negative way, we must carry on with the punitive consequences of that use. And so, as Deborah was talking about, the idea that her first thought was, oh no, this is going to hurt. Her second thought was something else, and she chose the other one. I had a very similar experience this past year when we were in Door County, what state is that? Wisconsin. And we were in a national park, and we were riding our bikes on a path, and I was going a little too fast, and I came around a curve, and I went off the edge of the curve, and I saw this tree stump, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to hit the tree stump. And my first thought was not, oh no, this is not going to happen. My first thought was, oh shoot, this is going to hurt. As I was propelled upside down, flying over the stump, I was suspended in time. You know, there are times where, well, there are not times, how can we say this? There is no time in God.
Right.
There is no time in infinite being. And so therefore, in situations, most of us have probably had this sense where in an auto accident or something where everything just slows down. And all of a sudden, after the event, everything goes back into place again. That's being suspended in time. There is no time in God. Time is something that we manufacture in our own minds. And so, in those moments, we have opportunities. There are a rich realm of opportunities to choose what we wish to think about. I chose to think about, if I keep going where I'm going to end up on my head. And I don't know what's under that layer of leaves over there, but I don't want to hit it with my head. So I had all this time to think, and I ducked my arm up and put my head down and landed on my shoulder and rolled all the way around to my knees. Boom! There I was. Didn't hurt a thing. In fact, it was kind of fun.
Oh, no, that's why you did it twice.
But the point is, there is no time in God, but there are a tremendous realm of possibilities and probabilities and choices. I gave myself the opportunity to not choose the negative and land on my head. And I got a hard head, but it would have hurt anyway. But I was able to roll over and I made a different choice. I examined the infinite realm of possibilities in that moment of time as I was flying through the air with the greatest of ease.
So we have these moments in time where, despite what we may have thought first about a topic or experience, we can change our mind, change our thinking, change our mind. Jeff Warren at the Omega Institute wrote this: as we get better at noticing where the mind goes, we also get better at deciding if that's where we want it to stay. The shower fall and the bike fall had many possible outcomes, and I honestly believe that I chose mine by my negation of the first thought and deciding where to place my mind. Ernest Holmes developed a unique method of prayer. We're all familiar with his method of prayer. And I believe that a lot of it came from this idea that Troward talked about with law. Because in Science of Mind, we realize that every thought that we have is a prayer. And our purpose in our prayer is to change our own consciousness so that we are in harmony with the divine law of life. Holmes wrote, and you're going to hear this again. I was going to say many times, because I think this is really valuable quote from him, and I had never heard it before. Never be astonished when prayer is answered. Be surprised when it isn't, and find out where you went wrong. Wow, we can practice that every day. We are all on this human journey of discovery, and the more familiar we become with the law that operates through our thoughts, that Troward wrote about, that Ernest Holmes read, and developed a process for us to be able to utilize, the answer to that original question is, the more we practice looking at our own thoughts, the greater chance of success we will have at using the impersonal law to create a destiny in this God space called me, to change my life for better. Now, to put Troward's work in a nutshell, which of course you absolutely can't, but I'm going to anyway, in one sentence, he stated his case, then logically proved it. And we can do that too. Practice makes perfect. Happy practicing.
Yeah.